Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on quite a fascinating journey into a legend, one that really captured the European imagination for centuries. A story that, even spurred voyages across the globe. We're talking about the enduring myth of Prester John.
That's right. And you've given us a fantastic set of sources here, exploring the historical backdrop,
Right.
the potential sparks that ignited this whole legend, and the pretty remarkable impact it had.
Absolutely. How the world was perceived, explored.
Exactly.
So our mission today, as we sort of dig into these materials together, is to unpack this captivating story of Prester John. We want to understand why this figure who, well, maybe never even existed.
Right.
Why he held such a powerful grip on European minds for so long, and uncover some of the, frankly, surprising real-world consequences that came from this belief.
Yeah, it's a great topic.
Okay, let's start at the beginning then. Where does the whole Prester John story even get going?
Well, the legend really starts to take shape, solidify in the 12th century. There's a pivotal moment, actually, with the appearance of a rather mysterious letter.
Ah, okay.
It started circulating through Europe around the 1160s.
Ah, yes, the famous letter. This is where it gets really intriguing, isn't it? Because it wasn't just like a friendly note, was it?
No, not at all. It claimed to be from a powerful Christian kingdom way out east,
Right.
ruled by this king named Prester John, which, as some of our sources point out, probably comes from presbyter, priest or elder.
Crease King.
Exactly. And it wasn't just one letter floating around. Over the next few centuries, there were more than 100 different versions published.
100. Wow.
Yeah, that number alone really tells you how popular and, enduring this legend became, how much people wanted to believe in this place.
And who are these letters supposedly to? Sounds like they were aiming high, like the real power players in Europe.
Typically, yes. Emperor Manuel I of Byzantium, he seems to have been a frequent recipient, especially in the early versions.
Oh.
Later on, you see them addressed to the Pope or the King of France.
Right.
It just highlights the political and religious weight this legend carried. It wasn't just, village folklore.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
So what kind of kingdom did these letters describe? What made Prester John's domain so captivating?
Oh, the descriptions were, extraordinary. Almost unbelievable, really.
Like what?
Imagine a peaceful, virtuous kingdom, honey and milk literally flowing across the land.
Seriously.
Rivers brimming with gold, loads of precious gems, and maybe the most alluring part, the first recorded mention of the Fountain of Youth.
No way. The first.
That's what the sources suggest. It was basically painted as a paradise on earth, a Christian utopia, but out east.
Wow, a literal paradise. Okay, I can see the appeal. And alongside these opulent descriptions, was there a specific message? A tone?
Yes. Quite often there was this plea for assistance. Prester John supposedly wrote about being surrounded, threatened by non-believers, appealing to the Christian West for help, which of course really resonated with the Crusader mentality of the time.
Right, it adds that urgency, a kind of moral imperative to find him.
Yeah.
And it wasn't just wishful thinking. People actually tried to make contact.
Oh, yes. In 1177, Pope Alexander III actually sent his own physician, a Master Philip, on a mission
To find Prester John.
Sadly, Master Philip never returned.
Vanished.
Vanished, which just added another layer of mystery, intrigue to the whole thing.
So the legend's building, these letters are flying around. A papal envoy disappears. This really sets the stage.
Yeah.
But what were the deeper roots? Where did the idea of Prester John actually come from?
That's a crucial question, yeah. And our sources point to several earlier influences that likely fed into the legend's formation.
Such as?
Well, one big one was the existing stories about St. Thomas the Apostle, his evangelization in India.
Ah, right, the Acts of Thomas and all that.
Exactly. That established this long-standing idea that Christianity did exist way out in the distant East, a kind of foothold.
Okay, so a pre-existing idea of Christians in a far-off, exotic land. That makes sense. What else?
Then you have reports coming back, often filtered and maybe exaggerated,
Sure.
about the missionary successes of the Church of the East, sometimes called Nestorianism.
Right, among the Mongols and Turks.
In Central Asia, Europeans were hearing about these surprisingly large Christian communities in, unexpected places.
And Nestorianism, just for context, was a major branch of Christianity in Asia for a long time, wasn't it?
It was, yeah. a significant historical presence. So these real accounts, even if distorted, probably fueled the idea that a powerful Christian ruler could exist out there.
So actual, if maybe inflated, accounts of Christianity in the East bolstered the belief, made it seem plausible.
Precisely. And there's also the intriguing possibility about the Curate clan.
The Curates, who were they?
A group in Central Asia, their rulers during the 12th century actually had Christian names. Yeah. So that could easily have been another kernel of truth that got, retold and embellished until it became part of the Prester John story.
And the name itself, Prester John. You said Prester means priest.
Yeah, Prester comes from the Greek presbyteros, elder, which is the root of our word priest.
So priest John, but also a king.
Right. A priest who also holds the authority of a king, a powerful combination.
Adds to the mystique, doesn't it? A spiritual leader with temporal power, far away. Our sources also mention a figure, John the Presbyter of Syria, an early Christian figure. How might he fit in?
Yeah, John the Presbyter. He's way back late 1st century, mentioned by early church historians. Some traditions even say he wrote some of the epistles of John in the New Testament.
Okay.
Now, there's no direct, smoking gun link beyond the name John the Elder Priest.
Right.
But it's certainly possible that the memory, the sort of aura of this influential early John, contributed to the plausibility of the legend of Prester John centuries later. Made the name resonate, perhaps.
It really seems like this legend was a fascinating mix, wasn't it? Existing beliefs, rumors flying around, maybe some real history twisted, and literary influences too. What about things like Sinbad or the Alexander romance?
Oh, absolutely. Those were huge. These widely read stories painted the East as this land just brimming with wonders, incredible riches, bizarre creatures, magic.
No.
You name it.
Standard medieval fantasy tropes, almost.
Pretty much. And the Prester John narratives definitely borrowed heavily from that existing imagery. It amplified the fantastical parts of his kingdom, making it feel, plausible within that worldview, even if extraordinary.
So we have these whispers and rumors starting to kind of come together. And then comes a really key moment with Otto of Friesing's account in 1145. Tell us about that.
Yes, Otto. He was a German chronicler, and he recorded information he got from a Bishop Hugh of Jabala.
Okay.
And Hugh reported that Prester John was a Nestorian Christian king and priest ruling in the extreme Orient beyond Persia and Armenia.
And this account had some quite specific details, didn't it? Which seemed to sort of ground the legend a bit more initially.
Exactly. Hugh claimed Prester John had recently retaken the city of Ecbatana from some rivals. And he also supposedly tried to come help Jerusalem during the Crusades, but got stopped because the Tigris River flooded.
So it connects him to real-world events, the Crusades, makes him seem more tangible.
Right. It gave him a role in the conflicts of the time. And it also painted this picture of immense wealth and power.
How so?
Well, Hugh mentioned his fabulous wealth, symbolized by a scepter made of emerald.
An emerald scepter.
Yeah. And he also claimed Prester John was descended from the 3 Magi.
From the Bible. Wow.
Yeah, the ones who visited Jesus, which further cemented his Christian authority and added to this almost mythical status.
It's amazing how these threads start weaving together. Now, our sources also mention a potential historical event that might have been misinterpreted and really kicked things off early on. The Battle of Katwan, 1141. What's the connection there?
Right, the Battle of Katwan. This was a big deal. It was the victory of the Karakutai Khanate, led by a figure named Yelu-Dashi over the Seljuk Turks in Persia. Now, the Seljuks were a major Muslim power.
So their defeat was significant.
Hugely significant. It sent shockwaves. Europeans who probably lacked, detailed, accurate intel about who exactly won.
Right. News traveled slowly and got distorted.
Exactly. They might well have heard about this defeat of a major Muslim power by an Eastern force and interpreted it as the work of a powerful Christian king from the East, like Prester John.
Especially since, as the sources note, there were Nestorian Christian groups within the Karakutai Empire.
Precisely. They were vassals. So you have a Buddhist leader, Yelu-Dashi was Buddhist, with Christian subordinates winning a major victory against Muslims. The news filters back to Europe.
And gets interpreted through that hopeful Christian lens. Maybe this is Prester John.
It's a very compelling theory. It really shows how limited geographic knowledge, plus existing religious hopes and biases, could just completely reshape the interpretation of distant events.
A lack of good info mixed with wishful thinking, basically.
Yeah, it underscores how myths like this can be created and spread.
Okay, so the seed of the legend is planted. It's starting to sprout with these early accounts and maybe misinterpretations. How does it evolve and spread even further? We mentioned the forged letter of Prester John earlier. Let's dig into that a bit more.
Right, around 1165, this incredibly elaborate forged letter pops up. And it really took the legend to a whole new level, both in detail and popularity.
And its format was interesting, like a story told through letters.
Yeah, what scholars call an epistolary wonder tale, full of fantastical stuff. It strongly suggests influences from popular adventure stories, like the Romance of Alexander again, or the Acts of Thomas.
Okay, and this letter, supposedly from Prester John, who was it addressed to?
To Emperor Manuel the Comnenus of Byzantium.
Ah, the same emperor mentioned earlier.
Mm-hmm. And in it, Prester John claims descent from one of the Magi and says he's the king of India. So right away, establishing noble lineage and Christian credentials.
And the content. Was it just more the same paradise stuff, or did it ramp it up?
Oh, it ramped it up. Big time. Pure, unadulterated fantasy, really.
Right.
Packed with descriptions of just unimaginable wealth, magical artifacts, incredible marvels. This is where the legend really took flight, captured imaginations across Europe.
And this letter didn't just stay in one place, did it? It just spread like wildfire.
Exactly. Translated into numerous languages, even Hebrew. And it seems like with each translation, each copy, it got even more embellished, more fantastic details added.
And then printing comes along later.
Right, which just amplified its reach even more, made it endure.
It's really no wonder Pope Alexander III took it seriously enough to send that reply via Master Philip.
Mm-hmm.
Even though, as we said, Philip vanished. Adds to the mystery.
The fact that such a high-ranking figure, the Pope, responded, it just shows the perceived legitimacy of the legend back then.
Definitely. And there's a fascinating little detail from modern analysis
Mm-hmm.
about where the letter might have actually come from.
Yeah, that is interesting. Textual analysis suggests it might have originated among Jewish communities, possibly in northern Italy or the Languedoc region of France.
That's a really intriguing twist. Why might Jewish communities have been involved in spreading this story? Okay, let's fast forward a bit. 13th century, the Mongols explode onto the scene. How does the Prester John legend interact with this massive new geopolitical reality?
Well, initially there was actually a wave of optimism, misplaced optimism as it turned out.
How so?
Jacques de Vichy, he was a bishop over in the Holy Land, reported in 1221 that a King David of India, believed to be Prester John's son or grandson, was conquering Persia.
Okay.
And the hope was he'd soon come and help the Crusader states against the Muslims.
Ah, the hoped-for Eastern ally. But this King David, he wasn't quite the Christian savior they were expecting, was he?
Not even close. It turned out King David was actually Genghis Khan.
Genghis Khan?
Yep. The incredibly rapid Mongol expansion led some Europeans to think, aha, we've finally found Prester John, or at least his powerful successor.
Wow. So they just mapped the legend onto this new, powerful force emerging from the East.
Pretty much. Despite the letter likely being fake, that desire for a powerful Christian ally out east was still so strong. They interpreted the rise of the Mongols through that Prester John lens.
Trying to fit this terrifying, exciting new power into their existing mythical framework.
Exactly. And later, there is even an identification of Prester John with a figure named Toril, also known as Ong Khan.
Ong Khan.
Yeah, he was a real person, a Nestorian Christian ruler of the Karaite tribe, remember them?
Right, the ones with Christian rulers earlier.
Mm-hmm. And ironically, Ong Khan was actually Genghis Khan's foster father and later became his adversary and was defeated by him.
Complicated. And Marco Polo mentions this too.
He does. Marco Polo tells a story about a war between Prester John, meaning Ong Khan, and Genghis Khan, supposedly sparked by a marriage proposal gone wrong.
So the narrative shifts a bit here, doesn't it? Prester John isn't this invincible, almost heavenly figure anymore. He's a real-world ruler who can be challenged, even beaten, by the Mongols.
Yes, the portrayal becomes a bit more grounded, you could say, tied to specific historical figures, even if the stories are still legendary. But then, as the Mongol Empire itself eventually started to fragment and decline, the idea of Prester John being in Central Asia also started to lose its grip. Travel there became much harder, more dangerous. That initial optimism faded.
And this is when the legend starts its next big move, right? Geographically speaking.
Exactly. We see a significant shift. The location gets relocated again.
for this time?
towards Africa, specifically Ethiopia.
Ethiopia. How did that happen?
Well, with the Mongols fading as the prime candidates and Central Asian becoming difficult to reach, Prester John's kingdom started to regain its more fantastical qualities in the European mind.
Back to being more mythical.
Right. It started getting placed in various other exotic spots, sometimes back in a vague India, like in the popular travels of Sir John Mandeville.
So they needed a new plausible location.
They needed a new home for the legend, somewhere that still fit the bill. A powerful, maybe somewhat mysterious Christian land, far away.
And Ethiopia fit that description.
Perfectly. It was a known ancient Christian kingdom in East Africa, and its relative isolation, partly because of the rise of Islam surrounding it, just added to the mystique.
Right. Known to be Christian, but still distant and holding that air of the unknown, the exotic.
Exactly. And this association seems to have really picked up steam around the mid-13th century.
Makes sense. Marco Polo apparently described Ethiopia as a magnificent Christian land, too. That must have helped.
It likely did, yeah. Helps solidify that connection in the European imagination. And then you start getting more direct interactions.
Oh,
Ethiopian ambassadors actually showed up in Europe in the early 14th century.
really? What happened?
Well, in some European accounts of their visits, Prester John is mentioned as being their patriarch.
So the Europeans are hearing this connection reinforced, possibly by their own interpretation of what the ambassador said.
Quite possibly. And then you have writers like Jordanus of Severac in the 1320s explicitly placing Prester John in the Third India, which he clearly identifies as Ethiopia.
Okay, so by the 15th century, the focus is really shifting hard towards Africa. This must have had a huge impact on exploration, right?
Absolutely massive. European-African ties started intensifying. There were even, believe it or not, marriage negotiations between Aragon in Spain and Ethiopia in the 15th century.
Wow.
And the Portuguese especially became incredibly motivated by finding Prester John in Ethiopia. Explorers like Hero da Covilham were specifically sent out on missions with the explicit goal: locate Prester John's kingdom, forge an alliance.
So these weren't just, like, curious travelers. These were serious state-sponsored expeditions.
Oh, absolutely. Driven by significant political, religious, and economic motivations. Find Prester John, ally against the Ottomans, control trade routes. It was all tied together.
And they did eventually reach Ethiopia properly.
Yes. The Portuguese sent a major embassy in 1520. One member was Francisco Alvarez.
And he wrote a book.
He did. A True Relation of the Lands of Prester John of the Indies. It provided Europeans with a huge amount of first-hand info about Ethiopia, significantly increased their knowledge.
Even if it didn't exactly confirm the legendary Prester John they were hoping for.
Right. It described the real Ethiopia. But by the 16th century, yeah, the equation was pretty much set in the European mind. The emperor of Ethiopia is Prester John.
That was the common belief in Europe. But crucially, did the Ethiopians call their emperor that?
Absolutely not. Never. They never used the title Prester John for their Nugusa Nagast, their king of kings.
So the Europeans just sort of imposed the name.
Essentially, yes. There's even a great story from the Council of Florence in 1441. Ethiopian ambassadors were there, and the European delegates asked them about Prester John. The Ethiopians were apparently just utterly bewildered. They had no idea who they were talking about.
They must have been completely confused. Who's this Prester John guy you keep asking about?
Exactly. It really shows how the European imagination had just overlaid this legend onto a real place and a real ruler.
So modern scholars agree. The legend was just adapted. It shifted from Central Asia to Ethiopia when that became more convenient or plausible.
Overwhelmingly, yes. The legend was flexible. It adapted to fit Ethiopia, just like it had adapted earlier to fit Ong Khan or even Genghis Khan for a bit.
And did the Ethiopian rulers themselves ever become aware of this weird European nickname for them?
It seems like they were largely unaware of the association for a very long time, only really finding out through European inquiries much later. There's an account from the mid-18th century, 1751, from a missionary named Remedius Pritke, who talked with Emperor Idasi II, and it seems even then the emperor wasn't really familiar with the title being applied to him.
It's incredible, well into the 18th century. It's a powerful example of how a myth can just take on a life of its own, totally separate from reality on the ground.
It really is.
Okay, so as European knowledge of the world keeps growing, becomes more accurate through direct contact, what finally happens to the legend? Does belief in Prester John just fade away?
Pretty much, yes. The literal belief in him as a specific existing king gradually declined. More accurate geographical knowledge, more direct contact with both Asia and Africa. It made the idea less tenable.
And scholars started debunking it.
Right. By the 17th century, you have scholars like Hiob Ludolf, a German Ethiopianist, providing really compelling evidence showing there was no native connection, no historical basis for Ethiopian monarchs being called Prester John in Ethiopia itself.
So the myth starts to unravel under the weight of actual information.
Yeah.
But the impact it had already had, that was undeniable, wasn't it? All that exploration it fueled.
Absolutely undeniable. The legend was a major driver. European exploration, missionary work, scholarship, even treasure hunting. Oh, yeah. Chasing the rumors of his immense wealth. But critically, the Portuguese voyages, the ones that really kicked off the age of exploration, were significantly motivated, at least in part, by this fervent desire to find his kingdom, to make contact, maybe get that alliance against the Ottomans or other Muslim powers.
It's just amazing. A figure who likely never existed has such tangible, world-changing consequences, shapes the course of global history.
It's a powerful lesson in the influence of ideas.
And the legend didn't just vanish completely from culture, did it? It kept popping up.
That's right. It has this enduring cultural footprint. You see mentions in Shakespeare, Much Ado About Nothing.
Oh, okay.
Tirso de Molina, the Spanish playwright. John Buchan wrote a very popular adventure novel in 1910, actually titled Prester John.
Why do you think it kept resonating, even after people stopped believing he was real?
Well, it probably taps into those timeless themes, doesn't it? Hidden worlds, powerful secrets, the allure of the unknown East, the clash or encounter between different cultures.
Yeah, those were enduring tropes. And it even made it into modern pop culture, comics and stuff.
Yep. Sources mention appearances in 20th century pulp fiction, Marvel Comics, DC Comics.
Seriously. Prester John in Marvel.
Apparently so.
Yeah.
And in more literary works, too. Charles Williams, Umberto Eco Bottolino is steeped in this stuff.
Right. Eco loves playing with medieval myths.
Exactly. Avram Davidson, Tad Williams. It just keeps appearing. Even in music like that Animal Collective song Prester John, the myth clearly still holds some imaginative power.
It really does. That fascination with lost kingdoms, mysterious rulers, and there was even heraldry. Coats of arms associated with him.
Yeah, people created symbols for him. Depictions showed up in Canterbury Cathedral on speculative maps by cartographers like Ortelius, trying to visualize this legendary king in his realm. It shows how deeply embedded he became in the European worldview, even symbolically.
So ultimately, this whole story, the legend of Prester John, it's just this incredible testament, isn't it, to how myth, religion, political goals, and just plain lack of good information all mixed together, and how that mix shaped how Europeans saw the world and what they did in the world, their drive to explore.
Precisely. It vividly illustrates how deeply held beliefs, even ones that turn out to be, well, completely unfounded, can have these profound, lasting, real-world impacts on history.
Well, this has truly been a deep dive into the fascinating and really enduring world of Prester John. We've traced his mythical origins, seen how the legend morphed and shifted across continents, Central Asia, then Ethiopia.
Yeah, quite a journey.
Explored its pretty significant impact on exploration, on global interactions, and noted its lasting presence in culture. So, as we wrap up, maybe something to think about is this. How many other seemingly fantastical beliefs throughout history might have unexpectedly shaped real-world events? Influenced our understanding of other cultures in ways we're maybe only just starting to unpack?
That's a great question.
You know, what modern Prester Johns might exist in our collective imagination today? Perhaps subtly driving our actions, our beliefs, in ways we don't even fully realize.
Food for thought.
Definitely. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.